Chapter 2, South, Southwest, and Central Asia. So, Section 1, we're going to talk about South Asia and physical geography. And in particular, we're going to learn about the landforms of South Asia. We're going to talk about the most important factor, a hint here, it's monsoons. And we're going to examine how people use the land and resources of South Asia. At the end of this, you should be able to answer all those questions, so make sure that you are able to. So the Indian subcontinent, when it collided with Asia about 50 million years ago, this collision led to the creation of the Himalayas, and we already talked about that a bit, but really they're still growing a couple of inches a year. In terms of the major landforms of South Asia, the largest nation in the region is India, but there's others including Pakistan. Afghanistan, maybe it's kind of in between maybe South Asia and Central Asia, so we'll put it both those right now. Nepal, Bangladesh, and the Maldives, and Sri Lanka. So basically the Himalayas have formed a natural barrier that has isolated South Asia from the rest of Asia. World's tallest mountain is Mount Everest, and this is actually an image of Mount Everest of how long it takes you to get up to the top there. And that's an image of basically how you would actually traverse there, the traditional route. In terms of rivers, there's two major rivers that we're going to be concerned with. We're going to talk about the Ganges, which is the one that goes right here. And there's the Indus here. There's also another one called the Brahmaputra as well that goes down this way, but it mainly focuses on Bangladesh and not as much India. And the Ganges flows mainly through India into the Bay of Bengal, and the Indus flows mainly into Pakistan, into the Arabian Sea. Both are important for irrigation, drinking, and travel. The Ganges is also very important for the Hindu religious faith. In terms of plains and plateaus, the Indus and the Ganges flow together in the Indo-Gangetic plain. This area is very fertile due to the soil that's left behind. The term alluvial is mentioned in the textbook for that. That's rivers that bring forth fertile soil, and it's useful for farming. And this plain is highly populated, partially because the farming is so good. The Deccan Plateau also forms most of southern India. On either side, there's the Western Ghats and the Eastern Ghats, and this is the Deccan Plateau, kind of juts out there. And the climate of South Asia, the monsoons are really the important thing, or one of the most important things to understand. In winter, the monsoons blow in this direction, so from the northeast, and in summer they blow in this direction, primarily from the southwest. So from the northeast, they're blowing this direction. That's over the dry region up here, as opposed to over the wet region here, over the ocean. So they don't pick up moisture this way, so they're dry, and they pick up moisture this way, and so they're wet. As I said, wet summer monsoon is pretty predictable. Most of the time it can be pretty devastating when it either arrives early or late, but it travels further inland after starting at the coast bit by bit, travels up. The winter monsoon, you would think it would be super cold because it's across the Himalayas, but it actually doesn't get that far because a lot of the Himalayas block the cold air, but there's still quite a breeze probably heading that direction. But it's primarily out to the ocean. It's not as big an issue, but it leads to cooler winters, but not cold winters. In terms of land use in South Asia, most people live in rural areas. This is a village, and most of the people live in river valleys. Some of the cash crops they grow are things like tea, coffee, cotton, and sugarcane. Again, sugarcane is something you can eat, but it still isn't something you can use to sustain yourself. If you just eat sugar all day long, yes, you'll have plenty of calories, but you will not actually survive because it doesn't have a lot of the nutrients you need. One problem is that regions can become overly reliant on one crop, and this can be really catastrophic when the price of that crop goes down dramatically. Mineral resources, India has a lot of mineral resources, including coal and iron, but India does not have much oil, so it relies a lot on nuclear and hydroelectric power. In terms of population, you can get an idea here. This is actually from 1995, so it's even more so now. But you get the idea of this where the Indo-Gangetic plain is, and so that's definitely very populated, and also down here as well, this Bangladesh right here. But there are more cities bit by bit coming along the coast, and you can see kind of some of the dots here as well. Up here, I think, is New Delhi as well. That's an important city. That's the capital of India. Southwest Asia, we're going to now look at the objectives for that, and one of them is to learn about the major landforms in Southwest Asia, then to find out what the two most important resources are in Southeast Asia, and then examine how people use the land in Southwest Asia. I think I said Southeast there, but Southwest Asia. So it's a dry region bordered by water. A lot of it is desert, and water is incredibly important. Some deserts like the Rub al Khali, which is down here, are sand deserts. Some are pebbles and rocks and boulders and things like that. So oases are very important in this environment, and if you are traveling across the desert and you see the oasis, you are greatly relieved. Two historic rivers. Right here we got the Tigris and the Euphrates. Up here, here's the Euphrates, here's the Tigris. We talked about Mesopotamia last year, and that's where they grew up, and that's in the modern country of Iraq. They start up in Turkey in the mountains there. And in terms of mountains and plateaus, Iran is kind of one big plateau. It does have some mountains here, like the Zagros Mountains, but most of it is a plateau. And some of the mountains are in the region. It was where the rivers start, like in Turkey. That's primarily where the Tigris and Euphrates start. Seas and gulfs, this looks familiar, but here, just as a demonstration, we got the Mediterranean over here. We got the Black Sea up here. We got Caspian here. We got the Persian Gulf here, Gulf of Oman. We got the Red Sea here, and this here is the Indian Ocean. So those are all important. Persian Gulf really a hot spot in terms of oil production, because you can kind of see why. Hot, dry climate. Most of it's either arid or semi-arid. Can be very hot in the day and cool at night because there's a little cloud cover keeping in the actual heat. Some areas are a little bit more Mediterranean in the mountains and along the coasts. One huge thing is that the actual resources that are available. This is oil resource, and you probably can't see it all that well, but you can get the idea here. This is the amount of oil that's in Saudi Arabia in terms of oil reserves. This would be Canada, and way back down here, this color right here is going to be the United States. So they have tons and tons of oil. Lots and lots of oil, and that's one reason why it's so important. Petroleum is one of the major resources that they have. Oil and water, like I said in the previous slide there, very important, but oil is what they make their money from. Countries that have oil tend to have a higher standard of living than those that do not. Not all the countries have oil. And water, Saudi Arabia has none in terms of permanent rivers. Countries rely on irrigation projects, but this can be problematic, especially when rivers run through several countries. Like if you go ahead and you block a river further up north, and then it flows to the south, and then suddenly a country to the south cannot use its water that it used to be able to use to irrigate. That can be a serious, serious problem. Using land in the Southwest, three main land patterns of use: herding of animals. There's a Bedouin image there. Agriculture, so growing some crops with irrigation, and oil production. Many different crops are grown, and the Bedouins are the main herding group. Central Asia, physical geography. We're going to go ahead and learn about the main physical features of Central Asia, discover which natural resources are important in Central Asia, and find out how people use the land in Central Asia. So quickly here, we got Central Asia made up of the following countries, sometimes referred to as the stands, at least it will be in the book. Again, Afghanistan could be in South Asia or Central Asia. Let's put it in Central Asia for now. All of these are relatively new nations except for Afghanistan. That's one reason why I like to keep that kind of on the side. That were formed after the breakup of the Soviet Union. And so they kind of took off and became their own nation, so they're relatively young. And Afghanistan has been around for a long time. Central Asia's main physical features, if you see, there's some highlands, steppes, and deserts. Steppes are vast sort of treeless plains that don't get a whole lot of moisture. Elevation gets higher towards the east, and so if you head this direction, it gets higher. And then further down here, this actually, the Caspian Depression is what it's called. Caspian Sea is a salt lake, and then the Aral Sea is over here. Aral Sea is drying up. We'll get to that in a minute due to the irrigation projects that have siphoned off the water. Petroleum is a major resource, but so is natural gas. There's other natural resources too that are important, but and these countries, because they're young, are still looking to develop these resources. Much of the land is used in livestock racing because you can herd animals and have them graze on the steppes, and some for commercial farming, but the irrigation projects have done some pretty serious damage to the Aral Sea, and in particular, some problems due to a lack of water for the areas around there that used to rely upon it. There's some pretty striking images of that in the textbook. And then also pesticides have caused a lot of problems in terms of killing off a lot of the plant life and animal life in the area.